Russia claims to be counterattacking Ukrainian positions in Kursk. But is this actually just a Ukrainian trap that they've now sprung on the Russians? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about this development. Okay, so let's take a look at the map. You can see there's been some significant updates to the Kursk region on the deep state map. You can see here's where things were yesterday, where it showed Ukrainian troops controlling up to the borders here in Snagost and Kornivo, roughly even with this north-south kind of latitudinal line. But you can see in the last 24 hours or so, there's been some substantial changes with Ukrainian forces being forced from Snagost, right, being driven eastward, but simultaneously they're counterattacking, seizing the village of Kremenoe and Olgovka. So they now control north of Kornivo, and I think ultimately are possibly moving towards what might be a more prime objective of the city of Kursk and, more importantly, the Kursk power plant. That's just a theory. But the real shift here, I actually think that this Russian counterattack is more of a desperate move than a well-planned offensive. And the reason is this little area in gray here. Now, we're going to break down just what I think the significance of this is. But first, I wanted to mention, guys, you guys know that a lot of these influencers now, influencers, analysts, whatever you want to call us, are apparently for sale and have been bought by the Russians. But I'm not for sale. No government is going to tell me what I can and cannot say. And I've been approached by governments to get on message, but I just won't do it, right? I've spent enough of my life doing that. So I depend on you guys to support me, right? You, the audience. If you appreciate what I do and you've got the money to spare, it would really mean a lot if you became a member over on combatvetnews.com. And I make it worth your while. Twice a week, I get uncensored combat footage, the kind that YouTube won't let me show you, and I put it over there. We do a deep dive analysis about the tactics, the units. Oftentimes, the footage is as little as 48 hours old. If you want to further support me, you get access to all that, plus weekly Q&As with the lieutenant tier, where you can ask me literally anything from my time in Afghanistan to my favorite food to what I think about Ukrainian operations like this one. And of course, the ultimate supporters, the colonel tier, gets all that, plus the by name shoutouts at the end of videos. So check us out, combatvetnews.com. Best of all, there's a sale going on right now where your first month is $5 off. So if you want, your first month will literally be free at specialist tier and be discounted at lieutenant and colonel tier. So, you know, if you're gonna do it anyway, you might as well get that, save that extra money on your first month. All right, let's talk about the trap. Now, you can see live UA map is being even more ambitious with this Ukrainian operation near Veseloye. Why? Well, here's why. You can see, one, this actual footage, it depicts, or this depiction has Russian forces pushing south of Snagost, right, driving Ukrainian forces back to like this line here. I think that this is actually a breakout attempt by the Ukrainians. And here, I'm going to show you guys why. I'm going to illustrate some things, right? Yeah, that's right. We're using MS Paint, baby. Old school. Okay, so what is the significance here? Well, if you are the Ukrainians, right, we've talked on this channel actually quite a bit about the Sym River. And the Sym River, as you guys can see, runs right along this line here. We'll do it we'll make it blue-ish, right? So here's the Sym River, and you can see that it forms a little pocket. And if you're Russia, right, obviously you can't maneuver troops through Ukrainian territory. There's Ukrainians there. They won't really let you do that. So there's this nice little pocket that's created here. And up until yesterday, the Ukrainian lines went straight up here, okay? So here's the Sym, and here is the old Ukrainian lines. Here, let's actually get this right here, and we'll do, right, the border, and then right here, we'll switch it up. We'll make this the old Ukrainian lines in yellow. Okay, we know that the Russians have been very actively trying to build pontoon bridges, right, across some of these areas here. Okay, there we go. Right, they've been trying to construct pontoon bridges, and the Ukrainians have been blowing up those pontoon bridges, meaning that the Russian forces fighting inside this pocket have been not getting resupplied. And up to a certain point, this is not a problem as long as they aren't fighting that hard, as long as they aren't taking casualties, as long as they aren't expending bullets, right? Their burn rate, so to speak, of supplies of the soldiers in this pocket is relatively low. Now, the Ukrainians and the Russians both realize, though, that they are largely cut off here and that they are limited in their choices, right? So what do the Russians do? The Russians say, listen, it's a little bit like having to, let's say you had to, you were trapped in a room and you had to fight your way out. When's the best time to fight your way out? Well, here's when it isn't the best time. You don't want to wait until you're dying of dehydration or dying of hunger. That's when you're at your weakest. And that's true of these troops as well. The Russians do not want to fight when these troops are at their weakest. So they're saying, listen, once we realize we can't build these pontoon bridges and sustainably resupply these troops, we have to have them fight their way out, and we have to do it sooner rather than later. So as you can see, the troops here appear to have driven hard into the Ukrainians. There's a problem. That they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because the Ukrainians have realized, hey, you know, these Russians, they've just dedicated a large portion of their sources to pushing the Ukrainians out and trying to free themselves from this box that the Ukrainians have put them in. So as the Russians push, the Ukrainians appear to have been standing by. They've been waiting for the Russians to launch this attack. So now the Ukrainians have launched their own attack into the region. Now you notice what this means for the Russian troops sitting right here, right? The Russian troops now have a problem. They are strung out. They're not in defensive positions. They're in offensive positions. They're fighting all along this salient here. And now there are Ukrainian troops both in their front, in front of them, but also now there's Ukrainian troops behind them. So you can see how this may have actually been a brilliant tactical maneuver, especially for because look at where the Russians will be if this maneuver continues. The Russian force here is going to be bisected. Half the Russian military, right, half of this Russian occupying force is going to be here, cut off from the other half of their personnel and surrounded by Ukrainian troops. This part of the Russian military, they are now extended. They're fighting a challenging fight, trying to break out of this pocket. And even if they're succeeding, they don't have a backfield. They're depending on these soldiers in the rear to provide logistics, provide reconnaissance. It's where their headquarters are, right? Where would you put your headquarters if you had to push into this region here and simultaneously fight back the Ukrainians in this region? You have to put it somewhere in here, right in the middle of the thick of it. So this is a really gnarly situation if you're the Russians. But again, the fact that these events are happening, Russia attacks, and within a matter of hours, Ukraine is launching its own attack, that says to me that this was the plan, that the Ukrainians likely had a strong suspicion that they would create this pocket and that Russia would try to stage a breakout and that they would have their forces prepared to push into the Russian backfield. So I suspect that the Ukrainian goal is to contain this Russian breakout and possibly even lure them in, stretch them thinner, but only in kind of a controlled, gradual way, and then have this offensive effort push them from behind, right? So anyway, we will stay abreast of these developments as they happen, but this is definitely a sign, again, that this offensive in Kursk is something that's really showing the Ukrainian creativity and their commitment to maneuver warfare, right? This is something that you don't see in attritional warfare, these kind of positions, surprise attacks. It's a sign that degrading Russian intelligence is actually working. Russians are having a harder time disrupting these Ukrainian attacks before they build, and that the Russians don't seem to see it coming, or if they do, they're not able to do anything to stop it. So anyway, guys, that is all I had. Huge thank you to all of our Colonel tier members, particularly James Sterling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knudsen, Bastian Himmeling, Brian Kelly, Dale McCombs, James Ola, and Henry Roussier, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I appreciate you guys all so much for your support, and I will catch all you guys in the next one. Cheers.